Yes, thank you very much. Well, as Nick said, I think it won't have been the first time that I have been to Ellesmere and failed to answer the question. So as I was coming for my third talk about a career in finance, I thought, look, Ross, you've really got to answer the question. And the question is, how can I help to give you an edge? In the past, I've waffled on about how cool finance is and why it's really exciting about where the money goes, and that's all well and good, and we can do that another time. But we're here tonight to try and give you an edge. So I thought, well, how can I do that? And so I thought, well, I'll tell you a bit about me, because I was going to do that anyway. But I'm going to give you a completely different way to think about finance and to think about what part of finance you might be interested in, okay? And because what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to think about, when you're trying to choose your career in finance, I'm going to ask you to think about what kind of customer you would like to have. What kind of person would you like to have as your customer? I'll talk a bit more of that in a minute. The end of the talk, if I've got time, has been written by my daughter. Why? Because my daughter Maddie is in Bristol University doing biochemistry, and she's in her second year, and she wants to be an analyst like her dad. I've tried my very best to talk her out of it. My son has already taken the bit of bait. He doesn't want to do that at all. I've got twins, by the way. My daughter does. So she's a biochemist trying to get a job in finance, albeit from university. So I said, look, why don't you help your dad out here and give me a few points that I can share with the Ellesmereans about your experiences. So I've got that at the end. So if I've got time, I'll read that. Luckily, some of what she says does agree with what I say, so that's quite handy. So a little bit about me. I really won't hopefully bore you for too long. So I left Ellesmere in 1982. I had a fantastic time, thoroughly enjoyed it. I was captain of house. I was the captain of the worst second 15 rugby team on record at the school. I still think I have that record unbroken. I have a wooden spoon to prove it at home, which was given to me as a leaving present. So captain of the worst ever second 15 rugby team, captain of Lambert. I left Ellesmere with 3 A-levels, a C, a D and a fail. Of course, there's been an awful lot of grade inflation since those days. I'm sure if I was to take it again, I'd probably get a C, a D, and a fail again. But yeah, it wasn't great. It wasn't great. I liked biology, and I wanted to be a medic. I mean, even in those days, you couldn't do a medic with C, D, and fail. Trust me. So I went to London University and I studied pharmacology, but decided to go into finance again. A bit like my daughter, having studied the science, then decided to go into finance. So basically just got any job I could in finance. I mean, I was a scientist. I didn't know how to spell profit and loss. I had no idea. And then just made sure as soon as I got in that I started taking some exams. For the first 5 years, I kind of moved around a little bit. I got my big break at a big Swiss bank called UBS, Union Bank of Switzerland. Got my big career break, and from there my career, took off, and I've worked for Deutsche Bank, German bank, and now I work at Citibank, an American bank. So what lessons can you learn from that? Well, the first thing is, don't study what you want to study at university. So my daughter told me quite early on she was interested in finance, and I said, yeah, but you like biochemistry. Go and do biochemistry. You can do finance. So don't get too worried about it. Study what you want to do and do it well, and that'll be just fine. It'll be a little bit harder, but to be honest with you, the benefits of studying 3 years of what you're interested in rather than doing economics, if you don't want to do economics, I would never advise it. So study what you want to study. It's your last opportunity in your life to do what you want. From then on, there's always constraints on what you're going to have to do. So enjoy those 3 years doing what you want to do. Second point, don't listen to people who tell you you can't do it. Again, don't listen to people who say, oh, you'll never get into finance if you don't do economics. It's just not true. It might not be the easiest or the straightest route, but it can be done. Yeah. But do your research. I mean, I've made some mistakes along the way, believe me, in some of the jobs that I took. So do your research. And in fact, the fact you're here tonight shows you're doing your research. So that's good. And then finally, just have an ultimate goal. I mean, I didn't decide till the end of university as to exactly what I wanted to do. But I had to be flexible about how I got there. So the important thing is the goal. The route is less important. As long as the goal's fixed and you know where you're going, and everything that you do gets you a little bit nearer where you want to be, don't get too downhearted if the straightest route from A to B is blocked from you, because it might be. Because although we're not Google or Microsoft or whatever, it is still fairly competitive to get into finance. Because it's an exciting area, and depending on what you do in finance, you get to work and meet even at a really young age, some of the top people in commerce. And you can find yourself age 25 having a meeting with the head of Marks and Spencer's and and asking him about his strategy, which, you know, there are people who've worked at Marks and Spencer for 30 years who've never met the chief executive of Marks and Spencer. So, you know, it is a privilege to work in finance. So let's get to the core, which is this different way of thinking about finance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the different types of customers, slightly weird way of doing it, the different types of customers that you might want to work for if you work in finance, because that will determine the area of finance that you should go and read about. Because the problem with finance, one of the biggest barriers to entry, I think, in finance is not just that it's competitive, but it's a complete black box. You know, we surround ourselves, we're not the only industry who do this, but we're very bad at it. We surround ourselves in jargon and technical terminology, which makes it completely unintelligible to normal people like you coming from the outside looking in and saying, well, what does that mean? I mean, I work for the markets division. Well, what the hell's that? That's part of the corporate investment banking division. Well, what on earth's that? I mean, why should you know what these terms are? And every bank's got different terms. Morgan Stanley down the road will call it something completely different, and Merrill Lynch will call it something else. So, you know, we don't make it easy for you. So I thought the edge that I could try and give you is try and give you a bit of a map of the different parts of finance. I mean, finance is a big word, but the sort of areas of finance that I sort of touch, if you like. I haven't told you what I do, but I'll tell you that at the end. It doesn't really matter. I'm a research analyst, but I'll give you a sort of map based on the kind of customer you might come across, because that might just help you think about what part of finance might be more interesting. So, the first customer we're going to talk about is companies. Companies need money, okay? And there's a whole bunch of financiers. In fact, they're probably the best paid financiers, between you and me, who specialise in providing financial advice to companies, okay? So what's it like, and this is generally called investment banking or corporate finance, and all the big banks do it, as well as people like Lazard Brothers and Rothschilds, a few names you may have heard of. It's called merchant banking, if you're really old. So investment banking, all the same thing, you see. This is the point. It's a complete nightmare of terms. Investment banking, merchant banking, corporate finance, I'm lumping all those together. What have they got in common? They provide financial advice and services to companies. And you say, well, so what? I said, well, the thing is, there are certain there are certain elements of working in that part of finance that you need to think about. The first thing you need to think about is it's probably got some of the most unsociable hours. If you're advising the head of Tesco on an acquisition, then I'm afraid that from 9 till 6, he's running Tesco. Okay? So you are going to have to work, and at 6 o'clock, he's going to say, yes, I've had a look at that PowerPoint. Thank you very much. Can I have those new numbers for 9 o'clock tomorrow morning? So you're going to pull all-nighters, okay? If you're going to work in corporate finance, you're going to pull all-nighters. And there'll be teams of people working on proposals all the time, because the model when you're selling finance advice to companies is the pitch. You make a big pitch. They're big projects. They last about 3 months. There are big books of information that bankers go in and pitch to each other. And they've been put together by people like you. When you leave university, you've been working through the night to get them finished. But it's fine, because you don't have to come in until 9:30 the next day. You can have a bit of a line. So they're long projects. They're big game, you know. So if Tesco is going to buy Sainsbury's, they're only going to use 2 or 3 banks to advise, and there are 15, 20 banks after it. So you're all chasing the big prizes, the big long projects, and the selling that you're doing to a company is you're selling at a very strategic level. You know, Marks and Spencer come and say, look, you know, we're thinking of raising 20-year money. You know, where do you think we should do that? What sort of interest rate do you think we should pay? So you're dealing with the board generally in investment banking, corporate finance. You're dealing with big, high-profile transactions, which often don't work, okay? So you have to be prepared to accept that you've worked on that deal for 2 months and then the dollar's moved against you and the whole deal's been shelved until next year. There's a lot of that. But, you know, it's some of the best paid, because if you can turn around and say, do you know, the chief executive of Microsoft is a personal friend of mine. I've worked with him as a banker for many, many years. I mean, imagine what you're worth in the market. You know, you are the Lionel Messi of investment banking. And you can earn huge amounts of money. It's really, really tough when you start. It's really tough because there's a lot of these all-nighters and projects. So that's hopefully giving you a flavour of what investment banking, corporate finance, merchant banking is. It's advice to companies. Companies, as I say, it's unsociable hours, it's big project-based work, it's high-profile, it's extremely prestigious. It's very well paid if you're successful at it, but you need to grind your way through, and it's just a long project, and it's a strategic sell. Okay, you're dealing at board level. So let's move on to the next type of customer, which is actually my customer. I was a research analyst, and those are investors, professional investors, people who run, your parents' pension funds or any savings you've got, which is invested in the stock market. So Fidelity, BlackRock, Legal & General. These are the sort of names. Now, this is a very different selling idea. So I give advice to these companies. So first of all, it's a bit more like peer-to-peer. They're sort of my peers. I'm not dealing with the head of Microsoft, sir. You know, I'm selling to my peers. And again, I made business friendships when we were both very junior, and now these people are running Threadneedle, and I'm working at Citi. So, you know, I've grown up with my clients, which is very different, if you like. The selling that I do is on a very short time horizon. What shall I buy today, Ross? What shall I buy tomorrow? I'm talking on a very short time horizon. Very different to the bankers who are doing these long projects for a merger or acquisition. I'm selling on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. So today was all about, okay, Ross, so Trump's in, so what do I buy? Well, you should buy defence stocks. Well, you should buy cement stocks because he's going to build roads. You should be buying Apple because they're going to move money back to the States. So I'm dealing at that sort of level. So it's a peer-to-peer selling. It's a short time horizon. It's tactical. They're not sort of asking me, oh, you know, how am I going to meet my investment criteria over the next 5 years? No. We're talking about what's going to go up tomorrow, what's going to go down tomorrow. I'm dealing in much smaller transactions, obviously, compared to my investment banking colleagues who are doing mega deals. And the pressure on me, so the pressure on them is to win the big prestigious deal. The pressure on me is market share. So every day there's a certain amount of business being transacted in the stock market, and my job is to try and get as big a share of that. And if I have a good day, that's great, but I've got to start again from zero tomorrow. Whereas in investment banking, obviously the projects go on for weeks and weeks. So it's a different sell. I don't know whether or not people necessarily explain the differences in these kind of terms, but hopefully you'll probably think, oh, I'm probably slightly more minded this way than that way, and maybe that'll help. Okay, the next type of customer you want, I've tried to be as broad as I can about finance. So the next type of customer, I think is, I don't think I'd want to do this type of customer, and I'll explain why. It's private investors. It's people like me, your parents, people where you're an independent financial advisor. What's there to say about that? Well, again, the hours can be a bit unsociable because my personal financial advisor can't see me while I'm at work, so they have to come and see me in the evening. So again, it's a slightly less. You tend to do it in people's homes or from your office. It's all about managing risk. It's about understanding your client, understanding obviously how much money they've got, but more importantly, what's their risk appetite? What are their requirements? So you get if you're a real people person, it's fantastic. You really have to get an understanding of people, and things happen suddenly. You know, couples, sadly, somebody dies or gets very ill and doesn't work, and you're very close to your customer. You're very, very close to your customer, and that's why I would find it really, really tough, because you're giving advice to these people that you get to know really well about how they should invest in the stock market, and it's their money, right? I mean, all the people I've been talking about so far are dealing in other people's money, right? The chief executive's dealing in the company's money. My clients are dealing in fund saving, but here you're talking to the real person who went out and earned that money and is investing it. So wow, you've got a very close bond. I mean, my financial advisor I trust implicitly. You deal with a very wide range of products. As a financial advisor, you have to take exams, but he'll do anything from structured products, which is I won't bore you with, but stocks and shares and bonds and property and cash and currencies, and my financial advisor needs to be able to talk to me about all these different areas, whereas what I've been talking about so far, there tends to be a specialism. I was a technology analyst. I was an analyst who specialised in technology. The bankers might specialise in mergers and acquisitions or IPOs. So there's another one. If it's a career as an independent financial advisor, you get very, very close, and again, you become personal friends to some quite wealthy people. If you're a good financial advisor and you meet the right clients, you can be invited off to Ascot and whatever. I think you've really got a very personal connection with your customer if you're doing that. So if that's something that you find interesting, again, you're not stuck in an office either. You're often going out to visit these clients in their offices or their homes. So it's that's again a different type of finance, different type. The next type of customer I'm going to talk about is shareholders. This is running money for other people. So I'm now talking about people who are my clients. You're a fund manager, okay? So what's happened is I've got some money. My financial advisor said, why don't you invest it with Nick, who's going to run a technology fund and make lots of money for you, right? So I'm now talking about Nick's job, the fund manager, the person, and he comes to talk to people like me for advice on what to buy. So what's it like working for shareholders? These are shareholders who've given you the money. Performance. It's about nothing else. It's about performance, performance, performance. That's it. If you're good, you make money for your clients. If you're bad, you're out. Kind of simple. But at least you haven't got to worry about, are you a good team player? Are you highly collaborative? Are you a creative mind? Forget all that. It's performance, performance, performance. And there are people out there, not me, who say, I am so confident in my ability to make money in stock markets, I just want to be judged on how well I make money. I don't want to be judged on whether I'm collaborative or a good leader or... No. I'll just give me £100 and I'll give you £130 back. Obviously, you're working within risk. You're given risk criteria. You can't go mad. So, you'll be told, right, you need to go and invest this money. You've got these kind of risks. You've got to be careful about the risks you take. But... and your performance needs to be sustained over a long time. I'm not talking about performance this quarter or this year. Fund managers have a 1, 3, and 5 year track record, personally, the seniors. So if you make a really, really bad mistake, you can mess up your 1, 3, and 5 year track record quite quickly. But again, you're very much a free spirit. To some extent, you can buy what you, within the constraints of risk and a mandate, like a tech fund. You can't go buying cement companies, but you might have a general fund. It's for you to go and find the opportunities, and I spend my time talking to my clients and trying to convince them to buy the ideas that I've got for them, so they pay me a commission. But they're very free spirits. Again, I mean, the great thing about being told that you're just being judged on performance is you go and do what you want as long as you perform. You can buy or sell as much or as little as you like. Don't even turn up to the office if you don't want, but you've got to perform. So that's actually where the customer is somebody who's giving you some money. I put another one in here because I was trying to make finance as broad as I can. What about having a customer who are your team? Okay, what about your team? How about if what I was thinking about there is a finance director. So as a finance director, you're part of a team of executives that run a company, and you're answerable to, well, yes, to the shareholders, but you're answerable to your team. Okay, you work on the team, and there's no real sales involved. As a finance director, you're not selling to anybody particularly. You're being measured on how efficiently you run the finances of the company, but you haven't got to go and influence anyone. You haven't got to do any selling or convince anybody you're a nice person, or even that you're clever. You'll be judged on how well you run the money. You've got perfect information, right? It's your company. You're the finance director. You've got all the information you need, it's an interesting one because it's probably the greatest blend of sort of technical skills and management skills. I mean, as the finance director, you're the third or second most important person in the company, right? So if running companies, dealing in detail, having perfect information, if you're a real kind of detail person and you like to really dig into things, then maybe think about accounting and finance, because that's one where it probably, well, you don't have to study accountancy at university. Again, you can go and do what you want, because the accountancy firms are massive recruiters every year, and they take from all spheres. So that's something to look at. The other thing about finance director is it's very much a puzzle solving type of and you're often using other experts as well. So the chief exec says, look, can you get together with some experts and find out how I can get the company's tax rate down from 30% to 20%? Oh yeah, okay, we'll go and think about that. So there's a bit of puzzle solving where you're the head of a team, you pull in experts from outside the company, and you work with all this perfect information, this detailed information about how you're going to solve the puzzle. So that's another completely different type of finance. And I'm going to leave the best till last, because I know this is the one that you all want to be, which is, what if you don't want anybody as a customer, i.e. you want to be a trader? So traders, they don't have any customers. Again, it's perform, except they don't even have shareholders. They're just given a slug of money by the bank. and they go and run that money. Trading's changing a lot. It's becoming extremely mathematical. Much more of the trading that we do now is done by computer to computer, and there's a huge amount of pressure. If we're going to take the cost of hiring a human being to trade, then you've got to be pretty good, frankly, and it's getting very technical. There was a time, and there still are a number of people, where actually there were a number of East End guys and girls who were just streetwise and very sharp, and they made brilliant traders. But today, you probably do need maths. There's an awful lot of algorithms and risk balancing equations, and it's a lot more mathematical than it used to be. But again, from a customer perspective, nobody. You give them some money, you run it. That's it. The thing about being a trader compared to being a fund manager is that you can find in trading that your performance can swing wildly, very quickly. At least as a fund manager, the risk constraints you're in means you're not taking huge bets. You're taking a lot of small bets over a prolonged period. As a trader, you are potentially taking quite big bets over quite short periods of time. So it's similar to a fund manager, except it's sort of on acid. It's a lot more intense. So those are the customers. And so when you're thinking about finance, think about that. It's a completely different way of looking at it. I know, or at least I assume it is. So do I want to sell financial advice to companies? Do I want to sell it to people like me, peers who are investing in money? Do I want to sell to high net worth individuals, to real people? Do I want to run money? Do I want to be a fund manager? Do I want to be a finance director and work on a team solving puzzles? Or do I want to be a trader and just throw it all in the air and see where it comes down? So there's hopefully a different way of thinking about it. Right, I know I'm running out of time, so my next section. So I had a go at this, and then so did Maddie, my daughter. And this is top tips for an aspiring financier, I called it. Now the good news about these tips is that you don't need to worry about any of them until you get to uni. Okay, I want you to focus on IB. Sorry, I want you to focus on your IB. None of this stuff needs you to act on it now, but I want you to be mindful of it, because almost as soon as you get to university, and there'll be so many changes when you get there, your career is going to be the last thing on your mind, okay? Trust me, I've got twins. They started uni last year, and careers were not high on the list of priorities in Freshers Week. I can assure you of that. But quite quickly, you do need to start to think about these things. Less in the first year, a lot more in the second year, and then hopefully, if you've done that, the third year will take care of itself. So what are my tips? Well, the first one is get your calendar sorted out. So when you start at university, the first thing you need to be focusing on is the following spring, and it'll come like that. It'll be there in no time. You say, oh yeah, but it's September. I mean, you're talking about Easter. It'll be there before you know it, because banks have something called spring weeks, where they invite people in their first year to come along for a week and just have some talks like this about different parts of banking. They're quite competitive to get onto, and so you need to be putting your applications in sort of September, October. In fact, it's getting a little bit late for the spring weeks next year now, you know what I mean? To give you an idea. Most of the banks want to get this stuff out of the way by Christmas so they can focus on the new year. So a lot of the things that you want to do in any given year, you need to apply for in the fourth quarter of the previous year, okay? So in year one, you're looking out for spring weeks. They're called spring weeks, and they're done by the accountancy firms as well. It's not just investment banking. In year two, so my daughter's just started year 2 at Bristol, and so she's in the process of applying for summer internships next summer. Okay, so she's already had interviews, etc., for next summer. So this is just something to get your head around, that these banks do it a long way in advance. So get your calendar sorted out is the first thing. The next point that I would make is, if what I've said earlier gives you some idea of the kind of areas of finance you might be interested in, see if you can identify what the big debate, what are the big issues in that part of the market. So, for example, in corporate finance, the big issue is mergers and acquisitions, and what should mergers and acquisitions look like in a low interest rate environment. If you're talking about fund management, it's about active money over passive money. Computers are running money better than people. Oh, that doesn't sound very good. So what's going to happen about that? In my world of institutional sales and research, it's Donald Trump, it's the economic outlook. That's a fairly easy one. if you're helping private clients, I talked about high net worth individuals. It's about they're desperate for yield. They want income. They want income. A lot of these people are retired. They want income, but there's no income around. So how can they get income without taking extra risk? You can't just say to them, "Oh, buy some shares. That'll be fine," because maybe shares are too risky. So there's a big debate about how can you help private clients generate income in retirement without betting on the horses, without producing massive risk. And are there clever ways of doing that? And again, for aspiring finance directors, it's new accounting standards, which I've put here is tough, but give it a go. Accounting standards are very technical, right? Finance directors are very technical people. But have a look at that and see what you can. The third point, learn the language. It's horrible, and I apologise. Finance is, as I said earlier, full of completely impenetrable language. Read the FT. It won't make any sense, but give it a go. It's a bit like the best way to learn French, I guess, is to just move to France. If enough of it washes over, some of it will stick. Don't beat yourself up if you don't understand all of it. As I say, imagine my daughter, a biochemist, who started reading the FT and said, this is just ridiculous. I'm used to gobbledygook, I'm a scientist, but this is gobbledygook of a whole new order. But bits of it are sticking, and that's all it is. There are books, there's a book called How to Read the FT, would you believe? So, that's an interesting book. Some newspapers have trading competitions. That's something you can enter. It doesn't cost anything. And do something like, for example, I went on the web. So Tesco had their results recently, and the chief executive gave a presentation to the analysts like me. That was webcast, and that's on the web. So watch it. And see how much of it makes sense. It's only by exposing yourself to this stuff a bit at a time that you'll start to pick up bits and pieces. And it's amazing how easily something suddenly drops into the conversation in an interview, or you suddenly have a thought of a point that you can write on an application. So you do have to slightly immerse yourself in it to some extent. Again, not to be done now, worry about IB, but once you're at university. Study history is what I said, and I don't mean that by degree, I mean the history of finance. Warren Buffett, I don't know if you've heard of Warren Buffett, very, very clever man, extremely rich man as well. He's written lots of books. Have a look at some of the art, even just the articles online. I'm not asking you to go and buy his books. Just read some of the articles. He's not called the Sage of Omaha for no reason. He's a very, very clever man. The one interesting thing to think about is, why is there only one Warren Buffett? On the basis that he's not done anything illegal, he hasn't got inside information, why aren't there more Warren Buffetts? I mean, think how many investors. There is $77.5 trillion is invested in stock markets around the world, and there's one Warren Buffett. So go and see if you can figure out what's so special about Warren Buffett. I haven't figured it out yet, but your guess is as good as mine. Watch The Big Short. I don't know if you've seen the film The Big Short. Just watch it. Not The Wolf of Wall Street, but watch The Big Short. It's got some really quite technical stuff, apart from being a really good film. It's got some really quite technical stuff in about the real estate bubble in the US. So watch it, A, because it's a great film, and B, to see how much of it you understand, and see whether or not on the back of it you can maybe do some Googling and find out a bit more about it, because it was an amazing, it's a great film, and it's about an amazing bubble. So watch The Big Short. There you go. You don't have to read. It's not all about reading books. There's a little bit of fun in it. Again, when you get to university, see if you can join the investment society. It doesn't matter. I say, Maddie, biochemist, rocked up and said, "Oh, I want to join the investment society," and they said, "Really? But you're a scientist." Yeah. So join the investment society. It needs to go on the CV, and that's my other point, which is your CV. Again, when you get to uni, start to think straight away about what the CV might look like. It's a horrible, painful process, which you probably haven't done since your personal statements. But think about what the CV looks like, because if you've got it in the back of your mind, then when you do things, you think, "Oh, that can go on the CV," and you just collect things. Basically, you just collect things for your CV, and then start to think a little bit. I mean, again, I'm getting slightly ahead of myself here, but I'm trying to give you an edge by giving you as full a picture as I can. Start to think a little bit about your experiences, because of the kind of questions that you're going to get asked as you start, maybe in the second year at uni, when you start to engage with some of these banks. So some of them are easy, right? Examples of where you've been a leader. Gosh, there are enough clubs, teams and societies for someone to have been a leader of everything, I would have thought, or everyone to have been a leader of something. How about questions like this? Give me an example of when you made a decision based on incomplete information. Give me an example of something you failed at. And what did you do next? I've got lots of those. Give me an example of a dysfunctional group that you've worked in. And how did you try and improve it? Sure, you've got some of those as well. What character traits would you most like to change about yourself and why? Horrible questions, aren't they? But the point is, it's really just it's about self-awareness and just trying to say. So again, these are just things for you to start thinking about, because these are the sort of things that will come up. And also get to know yourself. I mean, one of the reasons for having an interview, it's not an exam. An interview is not an exam. The reason there's a series of questions is because otherwise you just sit there staring and smiling at each other across the table. So the questions are just there as an agenda. Okay, I interview so many people. It really doesn't bother me if I go off track. If I find something interesting to talk to the person about. And one of the things I'm interested in is how self-aware is the person. Because most of what I talked about in this finance is selling. And selling is something where you have to be self-aware. You have to know how you come across. Otherwise, you'll never be the best at it. So questions like, are you more at home with detail or high-level strategy? If you had to do a project, would you like to do a detailed project on a small area of your studies, or a big project? I suppose you do the IB, a big project on a more broader area. Here's a question for you. I was in a really bad mood one day, so I decided to ask this of all the candidates that came in. How will you decide if your career's been a success? That was just me having a bad day. But the point I was trying to make is there is no measure of success. We all think we know what success is, but there's no actual measure of success. I mean, is it money? I mean, it's okay. The number of people who didn't mention money. I work in investment banking, for God's sake. Of course it's about money. I don't work for a charity where it's about, it is kind of what we do. It's a capitalist entity. It's okay to say, well, I'd like to be financially successful, as long as you don't spend an hour talking about it. That's okay. But surely, I can assure you right now that is not what a successful career looks like. There's a lot more to it. So again, what is it about your career that you're going to judge as success? Is it peer recognition? Is it about winning awards? Is it about having a high profile in your industry? Is it about building things and being able to say, well, I designed that building, or I built that bridge, or So again, just slightly deeper questions about what are you going to call a success? The reason that's a great question is because when people then say to you, why do you want to be a steeplechase? You can say, well, because my measure of success is X, and actually I think that being a jockey will, for me it's about having clearly defined small goals that I could win. Do you see how you can use the question to actually answer the why us type of query? And another one, and this is my big issue, I'll be quite honest with you, so I wrote it down. Do you embrace conflict or do you avoid it? What kind of person are you? Do you relish an argument? I despise arguing, which is a really difficult thing when you're a manager, because you have to have some pretty difficult conversations, and for me, I find it really, really difficult. But again, what does that tell you about your leadership potential? Again, back to that question, what character traits would you most like to change? The one I'd most like to change about myself is that I was more comfortable with conflict, because I run a mile from it, and that makes it very difficult when I've got underperforming people in my team. Anyway, there's some things to think about. Oh yeah, just a couple of. Are you a natural risk taker? Are you a natural risk taker? Now you should know the answer to that. I mean, do you revise a lot before an exam, or last few minutes? That'll tell you a lot about whether you're a risk taker, believe me. But that's important, because in some careers I've talked about tonight, risk is more of an issue, and in other careers, avoiding risk is key. Advising private clients, it's about avoiding risk. Being a trader, sometimes it's about embracing risk. So your appetite for risk is really important. And when you're running money, you've really got to know about yourself. Are you inherently a risk taker, in which case you need to rein that back? Or are you inherently conservative, in which case you need to make sure that so knowing yourself is really, really important. And then the final one, another one of my particular favourites about me, how do you respond to criticism? Because again, that's important. In some of the careers I talked about, there'll be lots of feedback, and there'll be feedback on a very regular basis. I have to talk to my clients every day. In others, the feedback is less clear. As a trader, there's well, you could say there's perfect feedback because you've got a profit and loss every day. But in others like fund management, the feedback. So again, do you like a lot? I love a lot of feedback. The easiest way to influence me is to just say something nice, and I'll do anything for you. So again, understanding the kind of people you are is probably slightly neglected when people are giving career advice, right? It's all about, oh, make sure you make your applications. But actually, it's a really important part of trying to understand the kind of areas that you might be happy in, because, you know, the one thing I will tell you is that happiness, however you wish to define it, is an absolutely key part of a successful career. So I'm going to finish in the last 2 minutes with my daughter's contribution. She said, Dad, here you are. This is what I think you should tell the students. So remember, she's doing biochemistry at Bristol. She's in her second year, and she's applying at the moment for summer internships in investment banking and research next summer. There's a lifestyle choice that comes with working in finance: long and sociable hours, heavy workload, high stress. Are you comfortable with that? That's a bit harsh, Maddie. In the area you're interested in, you need to consider the work you're doing and also the hours you're going to be doing it. Are you in teams or are you alone? What kind of environment will you be working in? It's very competitive, but don't be disheartened. Even if you get 100 rejections, she hasn't had that many. Even if you get 100 rejections, then practice. That's the key. You'll feel terrible for a while, but knowing what goes into the process and writing a good CV is the key. And it also makes applying for internships a lot less scary. She says, you can start now, but I've just told you don't start now. Start, because she's talking about university. Yeah, you can start as soon as you get to university. There are programs that banks offer school leavers and even A-level students. These can be useful. You're trying to learn as much about this career as possible to see if it's for you. So don't be embarrassed to ask the simplest of questions. And also, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't be pushy, but by introducing yourself to people and just talking to people, it goes an awfully long way. She would say this, wouldn't you? I haven't read this, by the way. You don't need a finance degree or economics A-level to go into finance, she says, a biochemist. As long as you understand the skills required in finance and you try and develop them during your degree or A-levels, e.g. me in science, I develop my analytical skills, don't ignore it as a possible career. For girls, there are loads of opportunities. I have to say, by the way, at the moment there is a massive push on trying to improve gender equality. One of the problems the banks have had is we've been hiring 50% male-female at postgrad level for a number of years, but by the time you get to MDs, we're about 5% female. And so the problem we have is not so much, well, first of all, we don't want the female percentage to fall below 50, but we've also got to work on why we don't manage to get them through to MD. A lot of it's to do with family commitments, etc., but that's not good enough. We've got to improve that. Anyway, so Maddie says, for girls, there's lots of opportunities and insights. There are a number of banks who actually have, in fact, the way that Maddie got into this was she went to her school, she went to UBS to a Women in Finance. Some of the schools actually do Women in Finance initiatives, dinners, etc., etc. And I said to her, so how did it go? And she said, well, I met this lady. She was the head of trading at UBS. She was the scariest woman I've ever met, Dad. But there are lots of initiatives for women in finance. And so, honestly, you know, open arms. We welcome you with open arms. They're a great way to get exposure. It's a slightly less intimidating environment, she says, and you get to hear from women who actually work in the industry. Develop any hobbies you have. Don't give them up for A-levels. You don't need to be a part of the Economics or Finance Society, but a member of any club is useful. Okay, got all that. And then finally, she says, having a tiny idea about what you're really interested in goes a long way. I think that's probably a good place to leave it, isn't it? Even the smallest idea, the fact that you're here tonight, a tiny idea, the slightest interest, despite the fact you were brought here with a stick by the prefect. The tiniest idea, it goes a long way. Thank you very much indeed. I hope that was helpful.